Okay, we can start. Welcome to the 5th edition of our monthly live video AMA. My name is Raymond van der Waal. I'm head of marketing at Triall, and I have the pleasure to be joined here today by our CEO, Adil Esbay, our CTO, Niels Klomp, and our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Arno Bisschop.
Hi, everyone. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Thanks for organizing, Ray.
So similar to our previous sessions, we will be answering both live and pre-submitted questions from the trial community. But before we start with the questions, we'd like to briefly address some important news. As those that follow us on our socials by now know, we have published the plans of our new Triall token economics today. These token economics will become effective with the next clinical trial that will onboard the Triall platform. If you are interested in knowing more, we highly recommend you to read the Medium article, which provides you with all of the details and which also lists the key advantages of this new model for the Triall token holder. But for those that are listening right now, I will briefly address the core principles of this new model, starting with the first principle, and that is Triall will be locked to access the Triall platform. So for each study, a certain number of tokens are locked for the entire duration of the clinical trial to limit the circulating supply. The second principle is that Triall tokens will be burned as part of the two-token system, which effectively means that the total supply is reduced with increased adoption of the trial platform as more clients and more clinical trials onboard our software. The third one is that we will also leverage Triall to increase the liquidity of the Triall token market. That's definitely something that's newly built into the model, and that was not included in our previous token economics model. And the fourth principle is that we want to provide the community with improved insights into active clinical trials and associated token economics to really give you a better grasp of how those two go together. The core elements within this platform really revolve around what we call the Triall platform fee. So that's a fee that's being paid, and where as part of that fee, we buy back Triall tokens from the open market. So Triall as a company buys back those Triall tokens from the open market and then takes a percentage of those tokens, which will be locked in accordance with Principle 1, takes a percentage of those tokens that will be burned in accordance with Principle 2, and then also takes a percentage of that to increase the liquidity of our token market, which is in accordance with the third principle. Next to that Triall platform fee, we have a so-called clinical trial treasury, where we will dedicate 5 million Triall from our own reserve. And this treasury is really meant to offset any initial volatility in the two-token system. As to the fourth principle, improving transparency, we will make available to the public the wallets used for study, purchase, burn, and retention of Triall tokens. Again, to provide a community with more insights into how our token economics relates to our business development as we onboard more clients and more studies. Again, we very much recommend you to read the Medium article. The Medium article also includes a visual that details all of these different token streams and also explains the different deflationary mechanisms that are built into this model. So that brings me to the second part of our AMA, which will be the questions. The first question I have here is related to our marketing and business development. And the question is as follows: what phase, 1, 2, 3, or 4, so the different clinical trial phases, what clinical trial phases can Triall get into, and which trial software suits best for these trials? Adil, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, sure. Basically, our products can be used in all phases, all 4 phases. And because the basic principles or the basic requirements for a clinical trial are really the same, whether it's an early stage clinical trial or a late stage clinical trial. It's obviously often the number of data points that are different, or whether you're talking about a local study in a country versus a multi-center study in multiple countries or in different areas of the world. That can also have a difference. But again, in all phases, our trial products can be used. We're also not really dependent on any therapeutic area. That is definitely a great asset to us. So investigators from different kinds of communities with different backgrounds in disease, professions, and specialties, they can all use the trial products. I think what is interesting is that the level of use of our products is really dependent on the design of the study. It's also dependent on what kind of organization is using our products. If we have a large investigator-initiated community like a large hospital, they may not necessarily have the ideal infrastructure to manage and conduct a clinical trial, so that they may need more of the trial products, versus if you have, for instance, a service provider, that have some of the products lined up that we have, but are specifically looking for something that they don't have. And of course, also the available budget determines the depth of their need for trial products and services. I think another example, and we're all about that, is of course, decentralization of clinical trials. If you want to conduct a decentralized clinical trials, which basically means that you conduct some of the study-specific activities outside the hospital, then you may want to consider electronic patient-reported outcomes. So these are basically questionnaires that patients can complete in their home through their mobile phone, for instance. You also may think about, enabling wearable integration, so people can collect data on their phone or on their smartwatch, and you need to make sure that you can then bring all these data streams into one central database. And also these kind of activities, supporting decentralized clinical trials, they're all under one roof, under the trial roof. I hope that gives a clear answer.
I think it does. Thank you so much for that well-rounded answer. That brings me to the next question. Trial adheres to data privacy regulations such as HIPAA and GDPR, but how would this help FDA or the NHS to agree with it and improve the research? Considering this relates to our products and also the privacy element of our products, I'm going to give this one to Niels.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So obviously, compliance is extremely important within our industry. So on one end, we have to comply to clinical trial quality standards, of course, and regulations. And on the other hand, we have to comply to privacy regulations, like mentioned, GDPR and HIPAA. So breaching any of these can lead to delays, of course, to additional cost, and even to a clinical trial failure. So us being a software vendor, a solution vendor, we need to show that our clients, that we meet these requirements basically to our clients, and so that they can conduct their clinical trials in a regulatory compliant way. Since the clinical trial sponsor is the actual entity that is ultimately responsible for safeguarding those. And that's also where our technology comes into play. So what we are creating is a decentralized technology, which allows basically individuals to store data about themselves in their own storage solutions. So self-sovereign identity, which is what we are talking about, is really about making this inversion of what you are controlling. So to give you an example, right now, all kinds of organizations are storing an awful lot of data about you. And typically, you are not really aware of what is being stored about you. And SSI technology is basically about making a change in where you are in control about your own data, and where actual other parties can access your data, of course, if you allow them to access your data. And that also means that you are able, for instance, at one point to remove access to certain data. And SSI technology is also about ensuring that there is not an entity asking for too much information about you. What's really important there is that our platform basically allows this type of technology to exist, but we also have to be pragmatic about it, because organizations, they don't go from basically the one extreme, so the current more centralized way, to the other extreme, the fully decentralized way. Some organizations might, but you want to have this platform that enables organizations to move between those extremes, basically. So from the current world into the future peer-to-peer world, where decentralization is really important and becomes the norm, basically. So having our platform in between allows those organizations to do that, and then being in control about your own data basically automatically removes all kinds of problems that you would have otherwise. And of course, one of the key things with all of these regulations is that you do have to fully comply anyway. So even if we are providing it as a more centralized solution, which we can, obviously we will comply with all the regulations. And if it's a more decentralized solution, then some of the parts of those regulations are automatically removed, basically.
Yeah, thank you so much, Niels, for providing that additional context and nuance. I think you did not only cover on our future product range and the what of that, but also how we aim to get there and how that would influence compliance, how that would influence our clients. So thank you so much for those additional comments. I'm going to the next question. Your project appears to be a real business. What was the rationale for doing a token raise versus an equity raise? And can you talk about the token utility? Adil, would you like to answer this one?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, yes, our project is definitely a real biz. So TRL token is a key building block of our software ecosystem. And it really helps us to bring together all these key stakeholders in clinical research. So sponsor companies to patients, healthy volunteers, but also to service providers and all kinds of other parties that are necessary as part of the clinical trial life cycle. So the rationale to do a token versus an equity raise, they're not actually exclusive. So we did a token launch in September last year, and that brought us a multidisciplinary network of 2,200 token holders and almost 10K community members. And I hope that many of them are watching today, and we're forever grateful that they've supported us from day one. And we definitely are putting in our best to make sure that we continue to engage with our community as best as we can. But the token really helps us also to help with within the ecosystem and in different ways. For instance, we can use that on the later term, on the longer term, I should say, to reward and incentivize the promotion of us as a project. We've already had a few campaigns where we motivated everybody to spread the word about Triall, and here the TRL token has definitely has been helpful here. In terms of another application or utility, and it is really our vision of monetizing data sets. And we believe that democratization and data ownership is important moving forward. So we think that TRL token could be an important means of payments between hospitals and sponsors, between CROs and patients within the ecosystem. So we clearly see a very important use for that moving forward. The industry is currently not ready for that, but we feel that we should pick up that question and make sure that we have an operable ecosystem and be ready for once the rest of the industry moves along those lines. And we firmly believe that they will. The other more practical use, I would say, is that users within the trial ecosystem can now pay each other, right? Different companies can pay each other if specific milestones of contractual agreements have been met. So this is another reason. So I started by saying that the token the token crowdfunding versus equity raise, they were not exclusive. And that's still true because we have also onboarded equity-based partners along the way, and we're actually currently in talks, with others to continue to do so. So we make sure that we continue the growth of the trial project, and also along the way that we get partners on board that can help us in other areas.
Thank you so much, Adil. And I think that really also shows how we are really at the interface between the traditional worlds and the blockchain, crypto, and Web3 worlds. My next question is going to be for Arno. So the question is as follows. You said that your target market is characterized by rapid digitalization, decentralization, and double-digit growth. But how will you really achieve that rapid growth? What is your plan in this regard?
Well, thanks, Ray, for your question. I think it's a very good question. And actually, we're looking into 3 different entities. So we're trying to get these umbrella organizations on board. The one is big hospitals, like academic institutions. The other one is CROs, so contract research organizations. And the third one is big pharma companies. And what they all have in common is that they serve a lot of clinical trials. So if you look at an academic hospital, most of them, especially the bigger ones, they have their own clinical trial desk in-house. So if you're able to get them involved and get them on your software, then you're able to get yourself into a lot of clinical trials. Same accounts for pharma, same accounts obviously for CROs. The other thing is that within the clinical community, when members are using a system and they like it, they won't leave. And that's the one end, so they will stay with the system. You see that also with electronic patient records. So if you're already used to working with an APD or of an electronic patient record, then you won't stop using it for a while, because it has a lot of hassle to switch systems. And the other thing is that because of the partnership and the relationships within the clinical community are so strong, they will really be an advisor to other people. Well, you should use this system because it works so well. And that's the other, I think it's more of a second phase of growth. So the first phase is to get these bigger institutions on board and try to get into as many clinical trials as we can. And then the second phase of growth will be the word of mouth, and hopefully it spreads like a wildfire. So that's the hypothesis that we have on this part.
Thank you, Arno. I think it sounds all very clear. I do have a follow-up question on that. Another question that perhaps relates a tiny bit to the whole business development side and how we plan to onboard more and more clinical trials. So the question is, does the uncertainty with regarding to the war and the global economic instability translate to more difficulty acquiring clients?
Yeah, I think that's also a good one, Ray. Well, I strongly believe that the members of the clinical community are strong. Well, actually, they are trained for crises. So if I look at doctors, as I am myself, actually every really sick patient is a crisis in itself. So that's our job. So we are trained to work with that. And I think that accounts for a lot of members of the clinical community. And another thing is that healthcare in itself is just a primary need in life. So I won't think that that all these economic disturbance that is currently on will do a lot on the healthcare system itself. Maybe on budgeting, you always see that when economic downfall is there, that budgets will be limited in a way because they're governmental funded. But on the other hand, the situation we're in, for example, with CROs, with big pharma companies, they will never stop developing new drugs and developing new medicines because that's their business model. So I don't believe that will stop. I do believe that they will need a more efficient and maybe a cheaper model to do so. But that's in a way something that we're offering, because it's way more efficient what we're doing than the current practice. So I think that there's a real good connection over there.
Thank you, Arno. I like that final comment on cost efficiency being even more important in times like this. So I'm going to jump to the next question. I like how the website gets updated regularly. It helps me keeping track on current developments. However, the short-term roadmap is a little bit unclear to me. Could you shed some light on how we are progressing in terms of the short-term roadmap and what phase we are in? Are there any plans on a new short-term roadmap? So I'd like to propose that that Niels perhaps provides a bit of an update on the work that we've been doing as regarding the e-consent application enabled by self-sovereign identity technology. And then I will tell a bit more about the short-term roadmap and any upcoming website updates.
Sure, happy to. I think before starting with the e-consent, I would also like to give a little bit of an insight in some of the underlying platform stuff that we have been working on, because what you have to be aware of is that as Triall, we are basically, as I mentioned also in the previous answer, we're basically creating for companies in the clinical trial space, we're creating the option to basically go from one extreme, so the current extreme basically, from the centralized type of approach to the other extreme, to a fully decentralized approach. And for that, we are building a software as a service platform. But it's not only software as a service, so it can also run on-premise if certain organizations really want to do that. It could be a private cloud, could be a local infrastructure, and it can also be a mix and match between those. So it can be our software as a service offering, and it can be on-premise. And of course, what's really important there is, because that sounds highly centralized, is that if you go to the other extreme, which is the decentralized way of interacting, you're talking about peer-to-peer interactions, meaning that you will be using open source libraries that we have created to basically be communicating with other peers directly without an intermediary in between, for instance. And to basically make all of this possible, we have been working very hard on the foundations of our platform, in which obviously you can have the concept of users, groups, roles, delegation, custody. So basically having the integration of hardware security modules to be able to sign on behalf of an organization. So because typically in organizations, you might have certain mandates. You're maybe authorized to do some things, but you're definitely not authorized to do other things. And you want that reflected, of course, also if you are working in a fully decentralized way, which is way harder than doing that in a centralized way, because how does the other party know that you're allowed to do something, for instance, if they are not using the same system you are using? Even as we sit here today, let's say this was an in-person meeting. Obviously, we all know each other, but let's say we would be in the room with some of you guys in the community. How do you know that I'm really authorized to act on behalf of Triall and what my mandates are? Yeah, because maybe I say so, but or maybe you will have a look in the Chamber of Commerce or something like that, but that doesn't give you the complete picture. Our platform and the decentralized technology can give you that complete picture. So right now we are working on, in this next few months, we are working basically on getting that platform fully up and running, which also has support for our version 2 basically of the blockchain API. So we already have our current blockchain APIs. Version 2 is way more advanced, which allows also for index data to be there, which allows for even more integrations of different blockchains, and also allows for personally identifiable information to be stored next to a blockchain, which is of course really important in our industry. And also has integrations, for instance, with all the big cloud vendors, so that organizations that are already using those cloud vendors, either for their infrastructure or for their authentication, and access management that they can seamlessly integrate into this platform. Next to that, we are working on the SDK as well as the mobile application that allows, of course, to also do those peer-to-peer interactions, to verify and prove data to others, to authenticate, to sign off on certain actions, to log into systems. And all of this will be coming this year. And we are also working on mandates. So, of course, if you're in a clinical trial, there could be a guardianship involved, for instance. So it could be either someone with dementia who cannot act on themselves, or, for instance, children. And there's all kinds of different guardianship scenarios possible. And then there's also all kinds of different legislations across the globe for these guardianship scenarios. And what we are working on is making this technology that we're building available also for guardianship. And that's basically currently an unsolved problem in technology. How do you really prove that you have a guardianship? And how do you then know that somebody isn't all of a sudden saying, hey, look, no, there was no guardianship. So basically, you have to prove the negative or the positive of it. The technology we are working on allows you to prove that, and also allows you to ensure that you have a later audit trail about all the steps, all the actions that were taken by different actors around a certain individual. So that you can be really certain that the proper rules of the guardianship have been followed, and that not all of a sudden, for instance, the person with dementia started making decisions, or that someone else was making decisions for that person, which was on the guardianship and was assigned to one or two other people, for instance. With that, because otherwise I keep talking too long, I'm afraid. Happy to give it back to you, Ray.
Thank you so much for detailing all of that news. I think, what really strikes to me is the fact that we're really building a very granular infrastructure that will enable not only an application for informed consent, but for many more use cases. So that really requires us to take our time to consider all different scenarios. Like they say, Rome wasn't built in a day. And this is going to take some time to get this all fully secure and in a way that we do have that granularity. Regarding the website, so as the person already mentions, the website is updated regularly, and that's something that we will be continuing to do. We are also considering updating our short-term roadmap again, just to give you more insights into what we're working on. Of course, we have these monthly video AMAs in which we already provide you with insights into recent developments and updates, but it's always nice for people to also have that in a visual that they can come back to and just quickly check how we are progressing. So that's definitely something that's on our to-do list. I'm going to jump to the next question, which goes as follows. Dear Triall team, I understand that this isn't the top priority at the moment, but you've told us several times that there is continuous effort to realize a centralized exchange listing. Could you explain us a bit more about this process and your thoughts about this topic? Is it a well-considered choice to wait until the market segment is better, or is it just hard to accomplish, and are we in the time-consuming application process at the moment? Curious to hear your thoughts about this topic. I'll be happy to answer this question. So in the past period, we've had various offers from lower tier centralized exchanges, but as a company and also considering our token and our community, we're really aiming for the higher tier exchanges that can truly help us promote the liquidity of the Triall token while also increasing our token holder base. So our opportunities here will really increase as we onboard more clients and high-profile partners, which is something we've put a lot of effort and focus on these past couple of months. We are also still actively talking with centralized exchanges. So this is something we are actively working on. And in our decision making, we are really striving to do what's best for the company and token, and thereby best for our community and token holders. So I hope that gives a little bit of insight on our current thoughts there and how we are approaching that. Well, that brings me to the last selected pre-submitted question. And I think I'm going to give this one to Hadil. We as investors will definitely choose a project that is safe and has a future. Could you please explain about the safety and future of the Triall project so that we can choose your project?
Wow. I think you've saved the best for last, right? It's a very sincere but also a little difficult question, to be quite honest. But let me first start by saying that I'm an investor also, so I understand the viewpoint of investors quite well. I think the truth is that success is never guaranteed, but in having a knowledgeable, hardworking, and persistent team, that can make all the difference. And when we talk to investors, they of course like what we do as a company, but more and more they're really looking, to the team in front and also behind the scenes. I think our team's track record should give some comfort to investors. For myself, I've incorporated several companies in the past, from start to exit. While I'm currently also heading up a CRO, which acts as the first launching customer for Triall. So that should be a so-called a de-risking factor, that our first launching customer is really within our control. So we can make our products better in collaboration with our first launching customer. Triall's goal will be to have high client satisfaction rates. And I think we know how to achieve that. For instance, we're now investing a lot of time in our earlier customers and clients, as we feel that they define who we are as an organization and also as a team. They give us a lot of useful, constructive inputs. That means that our proposition and offering will be better every time we talk to them. What we try to do is, in terms of making this a safe investment for an investor, is we try to integrate our own services as much as possible with the operations of the client. And so that facilitates the long-term relationship that we want to initiate with our clients. It's also good to mention that we are not a single product company. We're also not a multi-product company, but we really have a long-term roadmap. And we're trying to help our industry to be ready for what's coming. And we want to help our customers to be ready for this paradigm shift. And by definition, you cannot do this if you don't have a solid long-term plan.
Thank you so much, Adil. I think that that brings us to the end of this month's AMA. I think we managed to cover a lot of different aspects of the business, including our new token economics. Again, we would highly recommend any community members watching to have a look at our Medium article to get a better understanding of the different token dynamics and how that all goes together. If you happen to still have any questions, please do ask these in our Telegram community chat, and we will be very happy to cater to those questions. So thank you for watching, and see you in next month's session. And thank you to Arno, Niels, and Adil for joining me.